Hey everyone, it's Mr. Alvier for another chapter of Cabin on Trouble Creek by Jean Van Leeuwen. We left off last night at the end of chapter 10 with Solomon, the friendly Native American who left. He came back and said goodbye to the boys after spending many days with them, teaching them survival skills and wishing them well. And with a wave of his hand, he went back into the trees and was gone, leaving Daniel and Will alone. It's the month of December now, and here we are in chapter 11. Daniel felt strange when he woke the next morning. What was it? What was different? For a moment he couldn't remember. But then he did. Solomon. He was gone, and they were alone again. He was alone. Will was a help, no doubt about it. He could do things that Daniel couldn't do, things that Daniel wasn't good at, like figuring how to catch fish with a spear and fashioning rabbit snares so easily with his hands. He was willing to do most anything and cheerful about it too. But when it came to what Ma called common sense, thinking things through before jumping into them, Daniel was the one who had to take charge. Pa should be the one taking charge. Where are you, Pa? Daniel wondered. Looking up at the cabin roof, Daniel just couldn't believe that Pa wasn't here. Little slits of daylight shone through. That was where the water was surely going to drip in when the heavy snows came, as they would. And soon, most likely, Daniel thought. Daniel had no doubt that Pa could fix the roof, but he himself had no thought of how to do it. What could have happened to Pa and Ma? Daniel felt a sudden sharp pang deep in the pit of his stomach. For so long he'd gone on thinking they would get here any day now. If not today, then tomorrow. Only the days kept going by. His knife marks now covered almost the whole bottom log next to the fireplace. Last time he'd counted, they added up to close to 80. That was 10 weeks. No, 11. Something real bad must have happened. That was the only way that Pa could not be here. Daniel didn't want to think of what that something could be. It's useless to just lie abed thinking this way, he told himself. Better get up and start doing something. Get ready for the winter that was coming, whether Pa and Ma got here or not. Will! Daniel routed his brother out of bed. It's cold, Will grumbled as he struggled to his feet. They both stay wrapped in their blankets, shivering until Will got the fire built up again. Breakfast of hot cornmeal mush quieted Daniel's shivers and warmed his insides. And that reminded him. As soon as they finished eating, he set about figuring how much meal they had left. Only a few precious grains of salt remained at the bottom of the salt sack. Carefully, he shook them out. Then Will held the sack open while Daniel began transferring the meal by cupfuls from the larger sack to the smaller one, counting as he went. How much is there? Will asked. And for once he seemed anxious. More than likely he hadn't given a thought till now to the meal sack going down. Daniel calculated a moment. Enough to last about 2 weeks, I expect, he said. Maybe 3 if we're careful. Well, 2 or 3 weeks wasn't long. especially in winter. What if a heavy snow were to trap them inside the cabin? It was plain that they couldn't wait many more days for Pa and Ma. Daniel was going to have to take that Indian trail that Solomon had showed them to the mill. Before he had made such a journey, though, he needed warmer clothing. And what could he do about that? Looking around the cabin, Daniel's eye fell on his bed of leaves. His blanket. Of course. Besides the fire, the blankets were their only source of warmth. If he cut up one of them, he could fashion a rough coat for himself, and most likely one for Will as well. But should he use his blanket? Or the one that Pa had hung over the doorway till he could make a proper one? If he used his own, then he and Will would have to share a blanket for sleeping. But if he used the one covering the doorway, there would be nothing between them and the wild critters outside. Well, having a door covering was a comfort somehow, even though he knew it wouldn't keep out anything that really wanted to come in. So Daniel decided to use his own blanket. "We're going to make ourselves some winter coats," he told Will, and they set to work. The first thing Daniel did was spread his blanket out flat on the floor. He had Will lie down at one end, and using his knife, sawing away at the surprisingly tough strands of wool, he slowly cut out the shape of a coat. He used this as a pattern to cut out a second piece, just like it. This would be Will's coat. And then they switched places, and Will cut out a coat for Daniel. The blanket was just big enough, with some scraps left over for the patches if something like their breeches gave out later on. Next came the hard part, sewing the two halves of the coats together. As long as Daniel could remember, he had seen Ma sitting in her rocking chair next to the fire in the evenings, sewing new clothes or stitching up ripped old ones. But he had never paid attention to how she did it. All he could call to mind was her needle darting in and out, flashing brightly in the firelight. They had no needle or any kind of thread. But wait, that wasn't so, Daniel thought. What was it that Solomon had said? The plant fiber they had used for snares could be used for sewing too. So Daniel sent Will out to find more of it. "Bring back as much as you can," he said. It was sure to have other uses as well in the coming winter. And while Will was gone, Daniel tried to shape a needle out of a long sliver of wood. But it kept breaking just when he got it small enough. Maybe, he thought, he ought to try a piece of bone. That was what the Indians used. In the end, though, he decided they didn't need a needle after all. He poked holes with the point of his knife along the edges of the coat pieces, and he and Will wound the plant fiber through the holes. The work took most of the day to finish, and there was no question of buttons or any of Ma's other finishing touches. But at last they both pulled their blanket coats over their heads. "It's warm!" Will exclaimed happily. "It fits," said Daniel, relieved. The coats were long, coming all the way down to cover their knees. But that was a good thing, Daniel figured, since their breeches were so thin. They went outside to try them out. The day was cloudy with a cold wind blowing, a wintry wind. "Why, I'm warm as a tick in a bearskin," said Will, grinning, and he did a little dance in the new coat and moccasins, flinging out his feet and prancing in a circle by the cabin door. Daniel felt warm too in his blanket coat, warmer than he had for weeks, and just in time, because something was in the air. A cold dampness. a certain look to the low gray sky, and a smell. Daniel remembered that smell from other winters, from Pa sniffing the air as they walked back together from feeding the animals in the barn. Snow. Snow was on the way. And that's the end of chapter 11, my friends. I hope you all have a great night. Don't forget to brush your teeth. Very important. Wash your hands and wash your face and get into your pajamas and tell your family you love them. Oh, and one other thing. Don't forget to put your toys away after you're done playing with them. That's always a parent pleaser. Makes your parents smile. Makes them want to buy you more. I know. I'm a parent. All right. Have a great night, everybody. And I'll meet you back here tomorrow for chapter 12. Adios, amigos y amigas.